Avast there. It be too late to alter course, mateys.
Okay, so we got the new Element Sendero Sport Edition trail truck. This is the ready to run, and we're going to go ahead and take a quick look at the truck. I'm not going to go into a lot of details on this. There's already plenty of other YouTube people that have done videos on this truck, box openings and so on, gone through the truck. So this video is really just us going ahead and putting a few rock parts on it and improving its performance. So before we do that, we're going to go ahead and measure the ride height of the truck. I don't know if you guys can see that, but it's right about at resting weight without a battery in it, right around 3 1/4 inches to the bottom of the rocker. And we're going to put some Rock Pirates RC rear shock towers on it. Get all those adjustment holes there. And then we're also going to put Rock Pirates RC front shock towers for the Element Sendero SE on it as well. And again, we're going to have all that adjustment. The front shock towers don't require a panhard mount because on this truck there is no panhard. It's servo on axle. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we're going to do is take out these two screws right here and right here. And then also we got to take loose the shock right here. So that'll only take a minute. So I pulled the rear shock tower off of the passenger side. And I noticed when I put the Rock Pirates RC rear shock tower on it that I went all the way to the back hole here, furthest back. There's a lot of holes on the new chassis, just so you guys know that's a new addition to this truck. So they have lots of adjustment places to be able to move the rear shock towers on this truck. So I'm all the way at the back, but I noted that as I compressed the suspension and pushed the shock down all the way, the only hole I can hit to get the suspension adjusted right is this back one right here, because the suspension's not going down all the way. And the reason for that is that the new truck has this new fuel cell now in the back. And although it looks really cool, it's limiting the amount of the rear suspension, how much it can compress. So what I'm going to do to remedy that is, from a previous Element build, I have this old stock cross member that I'm going to go ahead and put in the place of this fuel cell. And with the arch on the original Sendero rear cross member, the pumpkin's going to clear this, suspension's going to come down further, and we're going to get more adjustment out of our suspension. So I'm going to go ahead and do that off camera. Okay, so I've got both sides, both shock towers off. And in order to get the fuel cell out, I had to go ahead and take these two screws out as well for the rear cross member that holds the rear bumper. So by doing that, I should be able to spread these apart a little bit and get the fuel cell out. Now, this fuel cell is pretty cool. I mean, with just a little bit of work, you can add a lot of detail to this, make it look real authentic. So I'm not going to throw this away. I'm going to put this to the side for now. And we might save this part for a further build down the road. So I'm going to go ahead and put that aside. And I'm going to go ahead, like we said before, and install this, just the stock Sendero rear cross member. And the shock pattern for this, or the shock tower pattern from this hole to this hole, is the same. So this is going to go right in without any issues. Okay, so I went ahead and reinstalled these two screws. I got the Sendero stock rear cross member in place, and you can move this front to back. You know, got all those holes there supplied by Element to be able to put this where you want it, but for this build, to maximize the performance, we're gonna set this all the way to the back hole right here. I don't know if you guys can see that. It's gonna be that one. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the shock tower on real quick. For that, we're using M3 by 10 screws, using the button heads. And I'll go ahead and install those real quick. So I've got both the shock towers on now from Rock Pirates here. And like I said, we went with M3 by 10 screws here to hold these on. And now look how far down this truck's going now down in the back. So we got full compression. The chassis rails are literally sitting pretty much on the axle. And then to find out which hole we want to go into, we're going to tilt the shock back up, compress it all the way, and then figure out which hole it lines up with. So it's lining up with the top row of Rock Pirates holes, the second one back. And to get those spacing right, we're going to use the Rock Pirates RC spacer pack and M3 screws and a nylock, and fasten the top of these shocks. So I'll do that off camera and then we'll take a look after. Okay, so to get the shock mounted up, I used a M3 screw here by 20, and then I backed it up with a nylock on the back side. You guys should be able to see that right there. And then in the Rock Pirates spacer pack, it comes with 2 different sizes. And to get the spacing correct, I used a shorter one, which is this one right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the other side, finish that up. Okay, got both rear shock towers on the truck. You can see the nylock there on the back side. The shorter spacer from Rock Pirates. M3 by 20 screws at the top of the shocks. And I know it's hard for you guys to see this on camera here, but this truck, because we haven't done the front yet, is literally popping a wheelie. I mean, the back of the truck's way down. And actually, the suspension on this thing actually feels even better. That definitely changed the way this suspension's working. So, so far, love what we're doing, and let's go ahead and jump to the front. So the front obviously is going to be a little more complicated because we've got these nice new inner fenders that we have to take off that were supplied by Element, part of the truck. And so we're going to have to take them off from the bottom side, it looks like. Can we verify that? Yeah, I'm going to have a hard time seeing this if I can get it in the camera. From the bottom side, there's a screw right here and right here that you have to take out to take the front of the inner fender skirt loose. And then we flip the truck over again to get the skirts loose, inner fender wells I should say. You got to take from the bottom again, this screw and this screw loose, and then same thing on the other side, this one and this one, and then the inner fender wells they'll come right off. And that'll allow us to access the front shock towers. Okay, so taking those inner fender wells out was super easy. It was just those 3 screws that we just talked about. And these inner fender wells, they're not too heavy. I mean, they got some weight to them, but I mean, they're thick enough to be rigid, very scale looking on the truck. And these are nice. We might have to put these back on when we get done here. So I'm going to go ahead and start preparing to take the front shock towers off. Okay, so for the front, we're going to go with the Rock Pirates RC front shock towers for the Element Sendero SE. And I'm going to tell you a secret, guys. Because this is 4-link suspension in the front and it's servo and axle, you don't have to have a panhard mount, obviously. So if you buy the Rock Pirates towers for the front, even though we'll probably create another page for these so it doesn't cause confusion for some customers, these are the same as our back ones. So if you get on our website and the front ones for the Sendero SE aren't showing available, but they're showing somehow on for the rear shock towers for the elements, then it's the same part. So just giving you guys a little hint there. So I'm going to go ahead and start taking this apart. Obviously 2 screws, this one here, this one here, and take the shock loose. And just so you guys know, I'm going to have to make some modifications to this servo tray to make the suspension move the way I want it to. So I'm also going to be taking this screw loose and this screw, because after I get the shock towers on both sides off, I'm going to spread the rails a little bit. So I got to take these 2 screws out to do that. And I'm going to take this tray out and I'm going to cut it across here and eliminate all the front portion here. I'm going to leave enough plastic here and here to pick up the rear screws for the shock tower and to maintain a cross member in here. But the reason I'm going to do that is, like we mentioned, this is a servo on axle. And once we get those Rock Pirate shock towers on here, to get the travel I want, this servo, you can see it right there, it's already hitting the servo tray. And when I get the Rock Pirates towers on there, this suspension is going to compress a lot more. And I need that clearance between the servo tray and the servo to get that compression I'm looking for. So I'm going to have to do a few things. I'm going to do that off camera so I don't bore you. But I'm going to go through it off camera and then come back and again try to describe all the modifications I did to make that work, okay? Be right back. Okay, so I'm at the point now to where I've got all the screws out. I got the shock towers out. I've taken these 2 screws here out so I can spread the chassis rails out. I'm going to pop that, get the servo tray out like so. Now they've got the wire running for the steering servo through the box, but that's okay. You don't even have to unplug anything at this point. I'm just going to take a set of dikes. I'm going to cut it right here. And I'm going to cut one more piece out of it. It's pretty rigid plastic, actually. Okay, so I notched that so I can pass it through there, get the wire off of it. So now what I'm going to do is I want to retain this hole here, because this is going to be the cross member when we get done. I'm going to cut it across here, and then on the other side, same thing. I'm going to cut it just in front of this flange here so I can retain that screw hole. And then that's going to be our cross member, and then the servo is going to pass up through where this, through the cavity between the frame rails where this used to be, and allow us to really drop the suspension down and really get some vertical climb and some side hilling out of this truck. So I'm going to move forward with that. Okay, so I finished cutting this. I cut it on my bandsaw, so you can see where I cut it here and then here. And so this piece here is pretty much a throwaway piece now, but if you are an experienced builder, you probably already learned this. You never throw anything away until the project's completed, because something could come up where we're going to need this later, and then you'll be like, oh shoot, I threw that away already. So till the project's completely done, never throw anything away, just set it to the side. And we're going to go ahead and reinstall this guy so we can pick up the screw for the rear shock tower here and then re-stiffen this chassis back up too, right behind the servo. And it's going to go right about there. So as you can see, look how far down now the suspension's going. The servo's actually coming up pretty much flush with the top of the frame rails right here. And that's going to allow us to really get a lot of adjustment out of the front of this truck once we get the Rock Pirates front shock towers on it. So let's dive into that now. So for the front shock towers, we're going to go ahead with a M3 by 8 screw at the back, on the back side. That's going to screw into the plastic here. And then because there's no plastic for the front screw to go into, we're going to go ahead and use the M3 by 10 screw. One of these guys here. That'll go in the front side. And then on the inside of the frame rail, we're going to back it up with an M3 nylock. And that guy's going to go right up here. All right, I'll go ahead and get these on, and we'll go over it real quick afterwards. Okay, so we got the Rock Pirates front shock towers on it now. And like I mentioned before, we used a M3 by 8 screw here with a nylock on the back side. Did that for both sides. And then we did an M3 by 10 nylock on the back sides, or on the back of the shock towers on both sides. And so I got all that in. I haven't hooked up the shocks yet. We're going to do that in a minute. But another thing I'm noticing is this suspension could even come further down, but there's something limiting it. And it looks like, I'm going to flip the truck over. I don't know if you guys can see this or not. Look right here. If you watch this, the drive shaft's bottoming out. So to remedy that, I think the next mod down the road will be to replace these plastic links that come with the SE and replace those with steel links. And all it needs is maybe about another 1/4 inch longer on the front links to increase this gap here on the drive shaft, and we'd be able to even compress this suspension even further. But we're not going to do that yet. We're going to go ahead and just continue with this build. So the next thing is we're going to get the front shock towers hooked up. But look already how much further down the suspension is. This servo is above the frame rails now. So this truck's come way down. So I'm going to go ahead and put the front shocks, hook up top of the front shocks. Okay, so I'm going to use a M3 by 20 screw now for the top of the shocks to mount. And I'm going to use a nylock again to fasten it. And to get the spacing correct on this, I'm going to go ahead with the Rock Pirates RC spacer again, the shorter one. And I'm going to compress the suspension all the way down the front, compress the shock down all the way, tilt it back, and see which hole we hit. And for this one, as the suspension is sitting right now, we're going to go in the second row down all the way to the back. Okay, so I got the shocks mounted up in the front. And as I mentioned, I'm in the second row all the way back, but there's still more room in the suspension. So I'm going to go ahead and move this up to the top row all the way back and really drop this thing down. Okay, so we got the front shock towers on, front shocks all mounted up, and look how far down this thing's going now. Thing's really down in the front. Could give us some really awesome vertical climb performance, side hill performance. One thing I do want to note before I spin the truck around and move on is, as I mentioned before, I cut the servo tray here, across here, and here with my bandsaw. But if you don't have a bandsaw, I understand a lot of people don't, so you can go ahead and cut these with dikes if you're real careful, but probably better off just getting a Dremel tool and putting the appropriate cutting bit on it and just cutting it with a Dremel tool. You can use a little handsaw if you have one of those. Just take your time, Try to keep the skin on your fingers. And but I mean, this is going to make a huge difference. I don't know if you can. Let me hold on. I gotta move my hands. I'm going to compress the suspension, but look how high this is up now. Top of the tires are way up above, even above the shock towers now. Same thing in the back. Look at that, full compression. The pumpkin's actually coming up in between the frame rails. And as you recall, at the start of the video, we took a measurement just to see what the resting weight of the truck was, or the ride height was. And we were at 3¼ inches. And I didn't even put the rock part sliders on this yet. That's gonna even bring it down a little bit more just because of the weight of them. But now we are at 2 3/4 to the bottom of the rocker. I don't know if you guys can see that. So we've really dropped this truck down, got the CG down, and a truck that already performed awesome for an RTR out of the box is even gonna be better. So I'm excited, can't wait to get this on the trail, and let's keep moving on. Come out, put some more parts on this. Okay, so now that we got all the shock towers on it, we're gonna go ahead and move forward with the body post mounts so we can get the body all situated. And for that, we're gonna use the Rock Pirates RC body post mounts. They come 4 in a pack, so you got enough to do the whole truck. And I'm gonna go ahead and start on this, and then after I figure out how to lay it out and try to hit the same holes that are in the body, I think we might be able to in the front with some different body posts, maybe some offset ones, and in the back as well. If not, I'll just do the old Rock Pirates trick, and we'll just put the Rock Pirates small sticker over the old holes and make new holes. So let me jump into that, and we'll see how it goes, and I'll give you an update. Okay, so we got the body post mounts where we want them. Here and here, here and here. And to relocate the body, we're just gonna put a drop of oil, just a little tiny dot on the tops of these, right in the center. One there, one there, one there, one there. So I don't know if you guys can see that, but just a tiny little drop of oil. Ugh. That was actually, doesn't really matter, but that was element 30 weight. And then, so then you get the body where you want it. Don't set it down, just get it where you want it. Get it lined up front and back. And set it down. Let it touch the body, top of the post, and then lift it up. So I don't know if you guys can see the dots where the oil's at. It's right there. And right there. Getting the light right, you can see it. So anyway, same thing in the back. It's hard to see in the back on the camera, but anyway, that's where I'm gonna ream the holes real quick. Now, if you guys don't have a body hole reamer for Lexan, this tool is well worth the money. So different people make them. This one is, I'm not sure who makes this one, but anyway, they're well worth the money. They got a very sharp tip. You gotta be careful. And you just basically push and twist. Just take off a little bit at a time until you get the diameter of hole you want. Do a little bit from the bottom side and the back side just to get a cleaner hole. Now you're probably noticing, obviously, that we're not using the stock hole location on this. I probably could have if I went to the hobby store and got some of the offset ones that Axial makes, but this body, I'm only planning on running it for a while, and then I'm probably gonna do a full custom build on this later with a different body. So for now, I'm just gonna go ahead and I need to make the holes a little bit bigger, but they're lining up. So let me finish doing that. Okay, so that completes the shock towers installation. And like I said, I didn't get the holes to line up. I could have probably if I got some other body posts from the hobby shop, the offset ones, but that's okay. I think this looks pretty decent. Actually looks pretty good. And then same thing in the back. And the bed's flat black, they don't stand out that much, so I didn't even cover these up. I might later with some tape or something, but I mean, everything looks really good. I'm real happy with it. Still got the stock rock sliders on it. We'll probably do those in a separate video. But I mean, the truck looks nice. Sits real low now, has a great stance. Huge difference. So we're at right about 2 3/4, and what we're at, I think what we say we were at when we started at 3 1/4, I think it was. So we've got the drop for over 1/2 inch, so that's quite a difference. Truck's super clean now on the inside. Look at the compression on that servo right there. Pretty awesome. So be a lot better for side hilling, a lot better for vertical climb. Like I said before, the back compresses all the way up, even between the frame rails now. And if you look at the side stance on this truck, everything now is just super low center of gravity. Okay, so I know some of you guys are already thinking, well, what about the inner fender wells? So for this build, just for sake of the build, let's just go ahead and reinstall them. So I don't know if you guys can see it, but I took my X-Acto knife and I scribed a line right here. It follows up through here, and then I don't know if you guys can see it, but right across here. So I'm going to go ahead and cut these real quick at those lines I scribed, and then we'll see how they fit. Okay, so that's it. We got the inner fender wells on. That cut worked out perfect. Came out really clean. Just the bleeder screw does touch right here just a little bit, but I'm able to move the cup around without any problems, so that worked out really good. Here's inside the fender well what it looks like. Obviously I could still, if I wanted to, you know, if I got some custom shocks later, I could trim this piece out and show off a little bit more of the shock, a little bit more of the shock tower in the future. But yeah, that worked out really good. Body went right back on, even after all that trimming and everything. Oops. Okay, one more thing we just added to the truck is the Rock Pirates RC battery tray. See if I can get it over here. And we just used the 2 center lower holes and mounted it with the Pirate facing towards the truck, front of the truck. And super clean, came out really good. So stoked with that. Pretty awesome. So that concludes the upgrade with the front shock towers, the rear shock towers, the body post mounts, and the battery tray from Rock Pirates RC. Let me get this thing on here. Getting the body to line up with the stock sliders there. There we go. All right, truck looks good.